I live in a location with local, state, and federal minimum wage rates that are all different. How do I know what to use?
Great question. When the local, state, and federal minimum wage rates differ, the employer must use the rate that is most beneficial to the employee.
Mitchell works in San Francisco. If an employee works in the city of San Francisco, which has a minimum wage rate that is higher than the federal minimum wage rate and the California state minimum wage, the employer must use the local minimum wage rate. Attica works in Central New York. If an employee works in a state with a minimum wage that is higher than the federal minimum wage, the employer must use the state minimum wage rate. Deshawn works in Tennessee. Tennessee is a state that does not have its own minimum wage laws. Therefore, if an employee works in this state, the employer must use the federal minimum wage rate. Meeting minimum wage requirements. Employers are responsible for making sure that they do not pay their employees below the minimum wage amount. However, you should know how to check for this too, so that you can make sure your pay always meets the minimum requirements. Let's practice this. For the following exercise, you will perform the calculations necessary to make sure an employee was paid at least the minimum required amount each week. Assume that the employer is subject to the federal minimum wage rate of $7.25 an hour. An employee was paid the wages identified in the chart below for working the hours listed for each workweek. During which week or weeks was the employee not paid at least the federal minimum wage? The employer in the scenario did not realize they were out of compliance. When they validated the employee's pay, they erroneously did the calculation as follows. The issue with the employer's original calculation above is that they combined work weeks. They can't do that. They must validate minimum wage was paid for each individual work week. The employer, by law, must pay this employee additional wages for week 2 and week 3 to bring their total wages up to at least minimum wage. Employers are responsible for making sure each employee is paid at least minimum wage for each individual work week. This is fairly simple if the employee is paid hourly, but if they are paid a flat amount for each day worked, daily rate, or a flat amount for each item produced, piecework rate, then the employer must do some additional math to make sure the employee is paid enough wages for each workweek.